You're gonna just stand there? I thought you loved me!
Step back, ma'am. Pathetic.
In the sweltering heat of the coast, poverty didn't just linger, it suffocated. For 16-year-old Fatty, the world had never been kind. Born into a household broken by her father's relentless gambling debts and explosive temper, her existence was treated as a curse. While her father gambled away their last assets and verbally bruised her mother Miko, Fatty threw herself into the only thing no one could strip from her, her mind. She possessed an exceptional, near-photographic intellect, topping every academic chart at the prestigious academy where her mother struggled to pay the tuition by operating a tiny market sewing shop. During physical education, the contrast was brutal. As the wealthy girls darted across the track in tailored sports gear, Fatty struggled at the back. Beauty, the spoiled heiress of a massive real estate conglomerate, watched with narrow eyes. Driven by pure envy over Fatty's top exam scores, Beauty stuck out her foot. Fatty hit the gravel hard. Her ankle gave way with a sickening pop. Laughter erupted across the bleachers. Clutching her swollen ankle, Fatty dragged herself into the empty locker room, tears blinding her vision. Beauty and her clique followed, slamming the locker doors and mocking her big clothes, her weight, and her mother's dusty stall. "Look at you," Beauty sneered, tossing tissue paper onto Fatty's oversized homemade clothes. "Your mother sells rags in a dusty market, and you think you belong here? You're just a fat, penniless waste of space." Unable to take the humiliation, Fatty pushed past them and stumbled out into the sunlit courtyard, sobbing and limping heavily towards the school gate. Fatty stumbled directly into a tall, polished figure standing near the entrance. Hansum, a third-generation business prodigy visiting the academy before transferring as a senior, caught her before she hit the pavement. Hansum hated the fake arrogance of high society and preferred a simple, authentic life. Instead of pushing Fatty away, Hansum stood firm, blocking Beauty and the bullies who had chased her out. His cold, dark eyes swept over the wealthy teenagers, instantly silencing them. "That's enough," Hansum said quietly. The authority in his voice left no room for debate. He helped Fatty to the infirmary himself. When Miko arrived at the school, her own rugged, powerful frame, inherited from generations of butchers, hunters, and carpenters, stepped into the nurse's office. Miko didn't bow to the school administrators who tried to blame Fatty for causing a scene. She wrapped her daughter in a firm embrace and walked her toward the gates. As they reached the street, a sleek executive car pulled up. Hansum stepped out from the back seat. "Get in," he offered politely. "I'll give you a ride." Beauty, who had strutted to the front gates expecting Hansum, her family's arranged betrothed prospect, to pick her up, froze in shock, her face twisted in rage as she watched the handsome heir hold the door open for the market seamstress and her chubby daughter. Hansum dropped them off at Miko's small sewing stall in the bustling open-air market. Embarrassed by her appearance, Fatty kept her gaze glued to her lap, refusing to make eye contact. "Thank you, young man," Miko said warmly as they exited. After the car glided away, Miko patted her daughter's shoulder. "What a nice guy. He will have a bright future." In Fatty's mind, she had only ever seen Hansum twice. Once, months prior, when she saw a strikingly handsome rich boy walk past her mother's market stall, making her wonder, what is a rich heir like him doing in a place like this? And that afternoon at the school gates when he helped her up and gave them a ride. What Fatty never knew was that Hansum had been quietly watching her for years, ever since primary school. He was captivated by her brilliance, her resilience, and her soft, genuine spirit. He wrote about her in his private journal, planning to confess his love after taking over his family's business so he could protect her forever. Miko arrived at the market to find her sewing shop completely gutted, vandalized, robbed, and partially burnt. Fabric was slashed, the machines smashed, and loan sharks, sent under secret orders, were already surrounding the ruined shop. The shop was their only lifeline. It paid Fatty's fees and kept her father's violent creditors at bay. The heart-wrenching loss broke Miko's health, causing her to collapse from severe stress. Desperate to escape the creditors, her abusive father, and save her mother's life, Fatty packed their few belongings in the dead of night. As their transport crossed the mountain pass, a heavy truck smashed into their car, plunging it off the cliff. That same night, before ambulance or any witnesses came, a rugged ex-soldier, whom Miko had once sheltered, pulled Miko and Fatty from the burning wreckage. Knowing her situation as an act of returning kindness, he used his remaining connections to fake their death certificates, gave them new identities, and brought them to his ancestral village to rebuild and heal. Beauty sat in her estate the next morning, convinced she had erased poor Fatty from Hansum's life forever. Hansum visited the academy, his heart heavy. He had harbored a quiet, genuine affection for Fatty, admiring her sharp mind and resilience. He had planned to wait until they graduated, and he officially inherited his grandfather's empire to confess his feelings, ensuring no one could ever bully or touch her again. When she vanished, Hansum hired private investigators. What they uncovered shattered him. Her mother's shop had been deliberately destroyed on Beauty's command. An official police report confirmed that both Fatty and her mother had perished in a fiery hit-and-run on the highway. Hansum stood in his private room and wept in silence, his heart hardened into ice. He swore off love, refusing to touch Beauty even as their families forced a formal betrothal. 4 years later, Hansum's dad passed away in a car accident. He was devastated. He worked twice as hard. 8 years passed. The city transformed into a skyline of glass and steel. Hansum took absolute control of his family's conglomerate, tripling its global market profits within 5 years through sheer, relentless discipline. Yet, despite his wealth and power, he remained emotionally detached, constantly evading Beauty's aggressive demands to finalize their wedding date. 2 weeks before their scheduled high society engagement gala, Hansum's headquarters opened recruitment for an elite executive security specialist. While reviewing live feeds in the security control hub, Hansum paused. On camera 4, a striking woman in a fitted suit walked through the lobby. She possessed a full, voluptuous, sexy, chubby frame, a woman who carried her curves with absolute elegance, confidence, and dangerous poise. His heart hammered against his ribs. Fatty? He rushed down to the interview hall, overriding HR to join the panel. But when he scanned the candidates, she was gone. For days, Hansum obsessively scrubbed through thousands of hours of server footage. She moved through the blind spots like a phantom. She was a ghost. At 11 p.m., an encrypted signal bypassed Hansum's personal tablet. Anonymous tip, internal breach in progress, executive finance server, 11:15 p.m. Hansum dismissed his personal bodyguards and sat waiting in his dark, floor-to-ceiling glass office on the 80th floor. At precisely 11:15 p.m., the electronic lock clicked. A figure clad in tactical executive security gear slipped inside. She moved with effortless, trained precision, plugging a quantum decryption drive directly into Hansum's primary terminal. The room flooded with light. "I knew my eyes weren't playing tricks on me," Hansum's deep voice echoed across the room. The operative froze, then slowly turned around. She pulled off her tactical cap, cascading dark hair over her shoulders. She was still chubby, a plush, gorgeous, sexy chubby woman whose physical presence commanded the room, radiating strength and raw allure. Her eyes were no longer timid, they were sharp, calculating, and fierce. "You're late, CEO," she said calmly, "and you shouldn't be in this room." Hansum stepped closer, his hands trembling slightly as he looked into the eyes of the girl he had mourned for 8 straight years. "They gave me a death report. I held the file in my hands. Who buried it? Where have you been?" Fatty looked at him, her expression guarded. "I didn't return for a high school reunion, Hansum," she replied, her voice steady. "I came to stop your company from being murdered from the inside. Plus, I didn't even know you held any feelings for me back then. The only reason I am standing in this room tonight is to repay a favor, for the day you stood up for me at school." Fatty pulled up the decrypted files onto his private screen. Over 8 years in hiding, her mother had fully recovered, supported by their protector's family. Fatty had earned double master's degrees in forensic accounting and cyber intelligence, transforming her natural intellect into a lethal weapon. "Someone is using a fake green tech investment deal to frame you for embezzlement and strip your voting power," she warned. "I came back to hand you the evidence so you wouldn't lose everything." Hansum was stunned, both by her ignorance of his deep feelings for her and by the scale of the trap. Refusing to let her leave his sight again, he used his authority as CEO to override HR, appointing her as his executive head of personal security. For 10 days, they worked late into the night inside his penthouse. Fatty, now holding degrees in cyber forensics, tracked every shadow transaction. As they worked, Hansum slowly revealed his past, how he had watched her since primary school, how he wrote about her in his journal, and how her death had broken him. Fatty was stunned to realize that the cold, powerful CEO had been secretly in love with her all along. The night of the engagement gala arrived. High society gathered as Hansum stepped onto the stage alongside Beauty, his uncle, and his arrogant cousin. On the table sat the multi-billion-dollar investment contract. Hansum paused, stepping back. "Before I sign, my security chief will present our due diligence." Fatty stepped onto the stage in an emerald velvet dress, commanding the room. She pressed a button, lighting up the massive screens with wiretaps, voice notes, and bank logs. The audio roared through the speakers. Beauty's voice, hiring gang members to destroy Miko's shop and order the hit on the highway all those years ago. Beauty gasped, looking at Fatty on stage. As the audio played and Fatty's cold eyes met hers, the realization struck Beauty like a lightning bolt. You're the fat girl from 8 years ago. You didn't die?" Beauty shrieked, backing away. Federal officers marched into the hall to arrest Beauty for attempted murder and fraud. Panicking as her life crumbled, Beauty looked at Hansum's cousin, who was standing nearby with a smug, amused smile on his face. The cousin was happy. He had used Beauty to do the dirty work, and now she was taking the fall. "You're just going to stand there?" Beauty screamed at the cousin. The cousin smirked. "I don't know what you're talking about, Beauty." Beauty snapped. "You lying bastard. Tell them the truth. You said you loved me." Beauty turned to the entire crowd, exposing the next twist. "I'm not going down alone. I've been having an affair with his cousin for 2 years. I'm pregnant with his child right now. The only reason I kept pushing Hansum to finalize the engagement was so I could sleep with him once, pass the baby off as his heir, and give your cousin full control." The ballroom gasped. The cousin's smile vanished, but he quickly sneered, wiping his hands. "So what?" The cousin sneered into the microphone, completely unfazed. The cousin pulled out a legal document, slamming it onto the podium. "Beauty was just our front. She is nothing. The corporate restructuring papers were filed 3 hours ago under shell companies my father and I control. What if we set up the accident that almost killed that fat bitch? And what if I tampered with your dad's brakes?" The room went dead silent. Hansum's eyes turned to liquid fire. The cousin laughed maniacally. "You can arrest me for the past, but I will be out in days. Corporately, we already own 51% of the voting shares. The hostiles have passed. No matter what you do, you cannot stop us from taking this company tonight." The uncle laughed alongside his son. They believed they had won the ultimate game. Fatty stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the marble stage. A cold, victorious smile played on her lips. "Are you sure about that 51%, cousin?" Fatty asked softly. She pressed another button on her controller. A new financial ledger flashed onto the screen, a private stock acquisition document verified by the International Trade Board. 2 weeks ago, an anonymous offshore trust quietly bought up a hidden 20% voting stake in this conglomerate, Fatty explained, her voice echoing with absolute authority. "I bought those shares as my personal contingency plan in case your corporate trap didn't go as planned." The cousin's face turned ghostly white. The uncle stumbled back, gasping for air. "Which means," Fatty continued, stepping right up to the cousin, "with Hansum's 40% and my 20%, we hold an untouchable 60% majority stake. You don't own this company. You own nothing." Federal agents stepped up onto the stage, slapping heavy steel handcuffs onto the cousin and the uncle for the murders of Hansum's father, the hit and run on Fatty, and corporate treason. As Beauty, the cousin, and the uncle were dragged out of the palace ballroom in shame, the crowd broke into thunderous applause. The media rushed the stage, but Hansum didn't look at the cameras. He turned to Fatty, taking both of her hands in his. "You returned to repay a simple favor. Hansum whispered, his eyes shining with tears of relief and passion. And you saved my life, my family's legacy, and my heart. Fatty looked at him, her confidence radiating through the room. I spent 8 years surviving in the dark, Hansum. I'm not running anymore. Hansum pulled out the black diamond ring he had carried for years and slid it onto her finger. Then reign with me, he said. Pulling her close against his chest, Hansum kissed her deeply in front of the flashing cameras, holding the brilliant, powerful and gorgeous woman he had loved from the very beginning.